Imagine waking up in the dead of night to the distinct, wet sensation of something chewing on your shoulder. You bolt upright. The room is quiet. Your wife is sleeping peacefully beside you. But when you look in the bathroom mirror, you find deep, non-human puncture wounds carved into your neck. For Sanjit and his wife Kajal, the first 2 years of their marriage were completely unremarkable. They lived out a quiet, entirely normal domestic life in a 2-story home resting near the banks of the Hooghly River in Kolkata. Then the silence started. Kajal stopped speaking almost entirely. Night after night, Sanjit would find her standing on their balcony for hours at a time, gripping the railing and staring out over the black water, listening to something he couldn't hear. Her appearance changed next. She abandoned her normal clothes, demanding to wear a bright red sari every single day. She paired it with traditional white clamshell bangles, known as shaka, which clicked endlessly together as she paced the house. But the strangest pivot was her diet. A woman who had never liked seafood suddenly forced Sanjit to visit the market every afternoon to buy massive quantities of raw fish. If he forgot, she would violently block him from the house until he returned with it. These subtle, eerie shifts turned a familiar domestic space into a hostile environment. Sanjit was trapped in a home he no longer recognized, with an entity that was systematically erasing his wife's identity. The tension finally snapped the night Sanjit woke to an animalistic crunching sound echoing from the kitchen. He crept out of bed and peered into the pitch-black room. There, illuminated only by a sliver of moonlight, Kajal was crouching on the floor, violently tearing apart raw fish with her bare hands. Thick, dark blood dripped from her fingers and stained her teeth. Startled, she snapped her head toward him. Her eyes glowed a furious, unnatural red. And as she leaped like an animal to pin Sanjit down and drink his blood, he caught a glimpse of her feet. They were twisted completely backward. Yet the next morning, Sanjit woke up in his own bed. The house was spotless. Kajal was humming in the kitchen, cooking breakfast as if absolutely nothing had happened. He almost believed it was a nightmare, until he saw the 4 kilograms of missing fish and the fresh, bleeding bite marks on his own neck. Terrified of the creature wearing his wife's face, Sanjit fled the house. He went straight to the Shobha Bazaar district to track down an old tantric, a local practitioner rumored to be an expert in identifying dark spirits. The parasite secures its territory by hollowing out its victim's sense of reality. By the time it begins the physical feeding, Sanjit is already paralyzed by a disorientation so profound he no longer trusts his own eyes. The tantric listened to Sanjit's symptoms and immediately gave the affliction a name, a Shakchunni. According to local folklore, this is the vindictive spirit of a woman who dies before she can marry. Driven by deep jealousy, she specifically targets young brides, forcing their souls out to consume their married lives. Once in control, the entity enjoys the domestic comforts it was denied in life. It manipulates the husband, forcing him to provide for it, while steadily draining his blood, drop by drop, night after night, until he simply wastes away. Knowing Sanjit was nearly out of time, the tantric followed him back to the riverfront house at dusk. The moment the old man stepped inside and began reciting his mantras, the room temperature plummeted, turning the air to ice. The entity violently rejected the exorcism. Kajal's eyes flashed blood red, her conch shell bangles began to rattle furiously against each other, and her hair whipped wildly through the air as she started to snarl. The tantric shouted his mantras louder, but they had absolutely no effect. In a single, blinding movement, Kajal lunged forward and locked her teeth around the tantric's throat. The lights instantly shattered, plunging the house into darkness as the slaughter began. The Shakchunni is a fiercely territorial apex predator. Its violence is rooted in a jealousy that cannot be reasoned with or banished. It arrives at the door with the singular intent to consume. When concerned neighbors and police finally forced the door open the following morning, they found Sanjit and the tantric dead on the living room floor. Both men were covered in deep bite marks, and their skin was stark white. Their bodies had been completely drained of blood. Kajal, however, was nowhere to be found. She had vanished entirely, leaving behind a sterile paranormal vacuum that the authorities were entirely unequipped to explain. There was exactly one witness. From a narrow window across the street, a 70-year-old neighbor named Mrs. Chatterjee had watched the entire massacre unfold. The sheer horror of the event shocked her into absolute silence. She refused to speak a single word to the police. It took weeks for her to finally break her silence and confide in her family about the woman with the backward feet. A few days after that confession, Mrs. Chatterjee was found dead in her bed. Her body, too, was entirely white, marked by the exact same teeth. Mrs. Chatterjee's terrified family abandoned the neighborhood that very night, but the local residents still know exactly which balcony to avoid. Decades later, people still report seeing a waving red sari in the darkness, accompanied by the sharp rhythmic clinking of conch shell bangles echoing over the water. The Shakchunni serves as a permanent, brutal cultural warning. It is the manifestation of unrequited desire, an entity that hollows out a happy home from the inside, takes the life it feels it deserves, and ruthlessly slaughters anyone who tries to uncover its secret.